This is what you're gonna learn today. I actually made this logo animation for an explainer video that you can find on the channel. I've broke down the tutorial into 5 steps so you can use the timestamp to skip around. The assets for this tutorial can be found in the description. So without further ado, let's get started. Once you open the project, you'll find the logo separated by layers, since we need to animate these individually. To get started, select the rectangle tool and make sure to draw a rectangle that matches the weight of the logo. Then, select the layer and duplicate it, and make sure to parent this layer into the original. Also, if for any reason you can't see this icon, use toggle switch just right below so you can reveal it. Before moving forward, let's create the show up animation for these two. Press P for the position and create a keyframe. Move the playhead to the start of the timeline, and let's just drag it out a little bit to the left. Select all the keyframes and let's press F9 to easy ease them. So let's move into the graph editor and let's adjust the handles so the movement had a little bit more of attitude. So now select both layers and press T for the opacity. Set a keyframe and drag it out to the right about 5 frames. That should be nice. And adjust the opacity all the way to 0. Now let's just select those and copy paste them around 10 frames later on. And yeah, that's looking good. Also make sure that the base layer is around 50% since this is gonna be handy later on. Also make sure to go to the content of the base layer, rectangle, fill, and set the opacity at 50% here as well. Alright, let's move into the main animation. Select the base layer and double click on the size. Set a keyframe and drag this one to the start of the timeline. Make sure to uncheck this. And now let's make sure that you increase the size of the layer until you see it's covered a little bit more than the whole screen. Now select both keyframes and set the start of the animation around 1 second mark. F9 to easy ease them. Move into the graph editor and let's just move this a little bit to the left. Something like that. That should be fine. Now let's move into the other layer. Press P for the position and set a keyframe. And drag this one all the way to the start of the timeline. Now let's just drag this all the way up. Something like that. Select both keyframes and set the start of the animation around the 1 second mark. F9 to easy ease them and go into the graph editor. Drag the handles all the way to the left, something around 15%. So this way the animation goes fast at the start and it goes slowing down by the end. Let's take a look at this. It's looking good, but it's a little bit too slow. So let's drag these a little bit to the left. Better. So now let's create a new layer. Go to layer, new, null object. Make sure to reposition this over the 2 layers that we just animated. Let's rename this controller. And select all layers. Let's assign a color so we don't get confused later. And make sure to parent the base layer into the null layer so we can control both of the movement layer and the base just using the null. So now that we have our base animation, we just need to duplicate this for every single part of our logo. So let's do that. Select all layers and press Ctrl D to duplicate this. Drag it to the top and change the color. Press U to reveal the keyframes. Select these and delete this since we don't need them anymore. Now select the new layer and let's just drag this a little bit up, something like that. Press R for the rotation and let's just play around until it looks good. Also adjust the position if needed. A little trick that you can use is you can press Command or Control on Windows while dragging this rotation so you can adjust this even better. So you might notice that it still looks a little bit off since it isn't the same width as the logo. So let's just move this a little bit and let's adjust the size accordingly. So let's move into the size of the layer. Make sure to select both keyframes and adjust the width just a little bit. And now repeat the same process for the movement layer. Go into the size, uncheck that, and paste the same value in the width. Let's take a look now. You can see that now it's looking way better. But we have another issue. The animation is starting from the mid of the composition and it isn't reaching the bottom. So we need to adjust the keyframes just a little bit. And don't worry, once we get this done, it's just duplicated and we're gonna get everything else done. So let's adjust the position, something like that. It's looking good. And now we need to move on to the size of the layer and increase until it reaches the bottom, something like that. And now adjust the position of the layer. Yep, that should be fine. So let's take a look now. Yep, way better. We just need to just know a little bit more. And there you go. So now all we need to do is select these three layers and offset this by, I don't know, 10 frames. Also, since we just prepared these layers, now we can just duplicate these and match every single part of our logo. So let's do that. Also, make sure to change the color of the layer so you don't get confused if the project scale. Let's select the new layer and drag this a little bit to the right. Let's adjust the rotation and reposition this all the way there. Adjust as needed, and I think that's looking good. And now let's adjust the layers by 10 frames. And as you can see, it's starting to take a little bit more shape. So now I will do the same for the rest of the logo and I'll be back. And yep, that's looking way better. Now, moving forward into the logo itself, let's select this so we can isolate it. Select the first layer and let's set the fill to radial gradient. By the way, you can also change the fill if you hold down Option or Alt on Windows and click the color itself. Let's set the color of the gradient to something like that and pick this. Let's make this one a little bit darker and let's decrease a little bit of the opacity. Let's adjust this one more time since I don't like it at all. Okay, that should be better. Adjust the handle and that's it. Now let's do the same for the rest of the layers. Now let's animate the opacity of these layers so they follow the same pacing as the overall animation. So let's select all of our movement layers and let's bring them back just to keep as a reference. So once the first movement layer goes over the logo, let's select the first part layer, press T for the opacity. Let's bring this 1 second to the right and drag this all the way down to 0. And it should look like this. So let's just copy these keyframes and let's see how it goes. So once this goes over this part of the logo, let's just select this and paste the keyframes and repeat for the rest of the logo. It should look like this. As there is a part where the logo actually pops up like the whole thing, we actually gonna adjust this last one in the following way. Let's take a look at that. Yep. What I actually need to do is to adjust all these keyframes so they basically end up at the same time. Something like that. Yep. Let's take a look now. Now that we got this part done, let's duplicate all these layers and let's change the color and set the start position of the layer by hitting Alt and left bracket or Option and left bracket in Windows. And now we're gonna change the fill of these to a solid layer. And now select all of these layers and by pressing Option and right bracket or Alt and right bracket in Windows, you can set the out point of this layer. And now it looks something like this. Let's take a look at the whole animation. Let's bring this layer all the way up by pressing Command Shift and right bracket. Now let's create a few lights that show up every time the movement layer passes over the logo. So now select the ellipse tool and let's just draw a circle like that and set the size to 250 pixels. Move into the effects and preset panel and look for the fastbox blur effect and drag it into the circle. Adjust the blur radius around 70 maybe. Yep, that's looking good. And now let's just adjust the opacity of the layer. Also duplicate it and decrease the size. And let's duplicate it one more time and let's decrease it around 40%. Select all the layers, toggle the switches modes, and let's change the blend mode to lighten. You might notice that there's no big difference at all, but you will notice later. For now, let's select all layers and pre-compose it. Let's rename this light. Toggle the switch modes and click on the continue rasterize icon. This is just to make sure that the blend mode that we set here in the layers works with all of the layers that are outside of the composition. Select the anchor point tool. Drag the anchor point to the center. Let's move the layer all the way up. Something like that. Let's see where the movement layer goes into the top and set a keyframe right there. Let's move about 5 frames before and adjust opacity all the way to 0. Then let's move about 20 frames later and let's decrease the opacity again all the way to 0. Now select all of the keyframes and press F9 to easy ease them. Move into the graph editor and select and right click into the blank area and choose the value graph. Now drag this keyframe a little bit down below so we can adjust the handles to something like that. This is just to generate a sort of effect like an overshot, so it actually looks like the movement layer is hitting something that causes this light to show up. Let's take a look at it. Let's adjust this one more time. That should be a little bit better. Let's take a look. And yeah, that's looking better. Select your layer and hit the asterisk just to create a mark so we can keep track of the keyframes. Now, let's just duplicate the layer and reposition it as needed. For example, here, and you just need to drag this like that. Yup, that's looking good. Now, before moving forward, let's add a few effects into the layers to enhance the overall look of the animation. So, select your first movement layer and go into the Effects and Preset panel and look for the deep glow. Let's drag it into the layer and let's adjust this accordingly. Let's set the exposure around, I don't know, maybe 5 should be good. Yup. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So now let's just select the same deep glow effect and paste this into the other movement layers. While pressing Command or Control on Windows and clicking the layers, you can select all of them individually. And that's looking good. And now let's do the same for the base layer. Well, actually, it's going to be a little bit different, but In the right moment that the animation goes by, set a keyframe in the exposure and double click on it to reveal the keyframe in the timeline. Move the playhead a little bit to the left and adjust the exposure all the way down to 0. Now let's move about 20 frames later and let's do the same. Select all the keyframes and F9 to ease them. Now let's move into the graph editor and make sure that you select all your keyframes and click this icon just to fit the selection to the view. Also, make sure that you have the right value selected or you're gonna run into the same issue as me. Now let's adjust the graph to create a sort of like novel shot. Now all we need to do is just adjust the keyframes so it has the proper timing. And repeat the same process for all of the base layers. And this is how it looks. Moving forward, let's create a few nulls so we can control the rotation and the overall movement of all of the animation. So create a null layer, make sure that it's right in the center of the composition. Now let's select all of the null layers that we created before and select from the drop down the null that we just created so we can control all of these null layers using this one. Let's rename this. Also, you need to parent all of the layers that we use for the logo. Also this. Also, just to double check, select your null layer, press P for the position, and try to move it a little bit just to confirm that you can move all of your layers using this one. While pressing down shift, press S for the scale and press R for the rotation. And set a keyframe for all of them. Now let's move to the start of the timeline and let's just play around with the values until we got something interesting. Now, if we want to improve the impression of all of this movement layer hitting the logo, we need to create a null layers that simulate the movement that the animation is doing. Meaning, if the animation is coming from the top left to the right bottom, we need to create a null that follow this movement. So let's get into it. So create a new null and make sure to parent the master controller into this one so we can control all of the animation from this one as well. Now let's create a keyframe for the position. And something like this, create another keyframe. Let's move into this one and let's drag this one slightly to the left. Now select all of the keyframe and press F9 to ease them. Go into the graph editor and drag the handles all the way to the left. So it is a hard movement like it is hitting the logo. Let's increase this a little bit more. Something like that. And let's change the preview resolution to check it out faster. Let's take a look. Yep, it's looking better. If you look closely, there is this kind of slightly movement that follow-ups with the animation, and that gives the impression that the movement is actually hitting the logo. Now, we just need to repeat the same process for all of the other movement until we're done. Also, since for this last movement the span of time that we got is too little, let's extend this keyframe a little bit. And also make sure to adjust the speed graph so the peak of velocity is at this right moment. We're almost done. So at the last layer, press S for the scale and let's create a few keyframes. And let's move around, I don't know, a little bit to the right, around here maybe. And let's decrease the scale around 85%. So select all the keyframe, F9 to easy ease them. Select the keyframe and drag the handles all the way to the left. And it should be looking good. But we need to adjust the timing on it. We need to make sure that this kind of movement show up at the same time that the logo itself is showing up. As a last step, select all of your layer and make sure to turn on the motion blur, since this helps to enhance the overall look of the movement. Also, if you're not happy at all as me with how to look with the depth glow, there's a little trick you can use to enhance the overall look of this. Create a new adjustment layer and add the curves effects into it and adjust the curve slightly. You can see how just a few small adjustments can enhance the overall look of everything. If you like this video, make sure to check out my other projects and feel free to comment if you'd like to learn something else. I'll see you in the next one.